Hello and welcome to Justice Insight Cam. Experience unscripted police encounters exactly as they unfold on body cameras. We go further than the raw video to uncover the legal facts and educational moments of each incident. Let's analyze justice in action.
Stand up. Hands behind your back, now.
Officer, I haven't committed a crime. This is an unlawful detention.
You don't get to decide that. You fit the description.
No, you fit the profile of an officer about to
Turn
end his
around.
career.
Last warning.
You're on camera. Every second of this is on you.
The park's high-definition security camera captured every second with harsh, unforgiving clarity. It caught the leaves whispering, the pond water trembling, and the exact instant a career collapsed in real time. Officer Kyle Braden had no idea the older black man he was closing in on, the man he'd already labeled a vagrant or a criminal, had spent 35 years in uniform commanding precincts and rewriting the very use of force policies Braden was about to break. The man sitting on the park bench, methodically tossing seeds to a gathering of mallards, wasn't nervous. He wasn't scanning for an escape route. He was Marcus Thorne, the retired chief of police for this very city, a man who had stared down cartel enforcers and political corruption without blinking. And now he was about to become the victim in a case that would expose the rot inside the department he once loved. Before we unravel this infuriating and ultimately satisfying chain of events, I need you to take a second, pause right here, and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Are you in the US, the UK, somewhere else? And if you believe that nobody is above the law, especially those sworn to enforce it, hit that subscribe button. This story is going to boil your blood, but you need to see how it ends. It was a crisp, bright Tuesday morning. Marcus Thorne, 64 years old, was enjoying the simple luxury of having nowhere to be. For 3 decades, his life had been governed by radio calls, budget meetings, and the relentless pressure of command. Now his biggest concern was whether the ducks at Miller's Pond were getting enough nutrition before the winter set in. He was dressed for comfort and warmth, a heavy, oversized wool coat that had seen better days. A beanie pulled low over his ears, and loose-fitting, distinctively unstylish trousers. To the untrained eye, or perhaps the biased eye, he didn't look like a man with a full pension and a paid-off mortgage in the ecstatic hills. He looked like someone loitering. Thorne sat perfectly still, his breath misting in the air. He had a small paper sack of mixed grains next to him. He watched the water, his mind drifting, enjoying the silence. But the silence was about to be broken. Cruiser 4, Alpha 2, rolled slowly down the park's perimeter path. Behind the wheel was Officer Kyle Braden. At 28 years old, Braden had been on the force for 4 years, just long enough to shed his rookie status, but not long enough to gain any real wisdom. In the precinct locker room, Braden was known as a hunter. He didn't wait for calls. He went looking for trouble. He prided himself on his arrest stats, viewing every interaction as a potential collar. He saw the world through a windshield of suspicion where every citizen was a suspect who just hadn't been caught yet. Braden spotted the solitary figure on the bench. He slowed the cruiser. In his mind, the narrative was already written. Lone male, heavy coat in 50-degree weather could be concealing a weapon, or contraband. Loitering in a public park during work hours, probable drug activity or vagrancy. It was a kaleidoscope of assumptions based on nothing but optics and bias. Braden didn't see an older man feeding birds. He saw a target. He pulled the cruiser to the curb tires crunching on the gravel. The dash cam was rolling. The body cam was buffering. Braden stepped out, adjusting his duty belt, his hand instinctively drifting near the grip of his service weapon, a ready stance that signaled aggression before a word was even spoken. Thorne heard the crunch of tires. He didn't turn around immediately. He knew that sound. He knew the heavy, rhythmic thud of police boots on pavement. He kept feeding the ducks, his demeanor calm, waiting to see what kind of officer was approaching his blind side. "Hey, you there? Step away from the bench." The voice was loud, authoritative, and completely unnecessary for the situation. Marcus Thorne paused a handful of grain halfway to the water. He didn't jump. He didn't scramble. He slowly dusted his hands off over the grass and turned his head to look at the officer. He took in the details instantly: the slightly unpolished boots, the aggressive posture, the hand hovering near the weapon, the name plate that read, Braden. Thorne knew the type. He had fired dozens of them over the years. "Good morning, officer," Thorne said, his voice a deep, growly baritone that commanded attention without shouting. "Is there a problem?" Braden didn't like the tone. It wasn't submissive. It wasn't fearful. It was the tone of an equal, and that irritated him. He closed the distance, stopping 6 feet away the reactionary gap, but his body language was invading Thorne's space. "I asked you to step away from the bench. I need to see your hands." Braden barked. Thorne kept his hands clearly visible, resting them on his knees. "My hands are right here, Officer Braden. I'm feeding the birds." "I'm asking again, is there a problem? Have I committed a violation? We've had reports of drug activity in this park." Braden lied. It was a standard pretext stop. There had been no call. The dispatch logs would later prove that the radio had been silent for 20 minutes. "You fit the description of a suspicious individual. I need you to stand up and provide identification." Thorne remained seated. He knew the law better than Braden ever would. He knew Terry versus Ohio. He knew that for an officer to demand ID in this state, there had to be reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime had occurred, was occurring, or was about to occur. Being a black man in a coat on a Tuesday was not a crime. "Officer, with all due respect, fitting a description is vague. Unless you can articulate a specific crime I am suspected of committing, this is a consensual encounter, and I do not consent to a search or a seizure of my person. I am enjoying my retirement. I suggest you carry on with your patrol." Braden's face flushed a deep crimson. He wasn't used to people quoting the Fourth Amendment to him. He was used to people stammering, apologizing, or running. This refusal felt like a slap in the face. "I'm not asking, I'm telling." Braden stepped closer, violating the tactical gap he was supposed to maintain. "You're loitering. That's a violation. Now stand up, turn around and give me your ID, or you're going for a ride. Loitering requires intent to commit a crime or obstruction of public passage," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "I am sitting on a public bench in a public park. That is not loitering. That is living. I am not obligated to identify myself to you absent reasonable suspicion. You are currently escalating a non-event into a civil rights violation. I strongly advise you to rethink your next move, Van." Thorne watched Braden's eyes. He saw the flicker of doubt quickly smothered by ego. Braden had committed. He had an audience now. A few joggers had slowed down watching. If he walked away, he looked weak. If he doubled down, he felt strong. "You want to play lawyer?" Braden sneered, reaching for his radio. "Fine, we can do this the hard way. I'm detaining you for investigation of narcotics activity and failure to identify. Stand up now." Thorne sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "Officer, you are making a mistake that is going to follow you for the rest of your life. I am giving you one last chance to walk back to your car. Get up," Braden yelled, his hand moving to his taser. The tranquility of the park had completely evaporated. The ducks, sensing the tension, had retreated into the water. About 30 feet away, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, walking her golden retriever, had stopped. She saw the aggressive stance of the young officer and the calm demeanor of the older man. She did what millions of Americans have learned to do in the last decade. She pulled out her phone and hit record. "I've got you on video," Sarah called out, her voice trembling slightly but distinct. "He's just sitting there. Leave him. Alone." Officer Braden glanced at her, his jaw tight. "Ma'am, back up. This is an active police investigation. Do not interfere. I'm on public property, officer," Sarah shot back. "I'm recording for his safety." Thorne gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Sarah. "Good citizen," he thought. "Keep the camera rolling." He turned his attention back to Braden. The young officer was vibrating with adrenaline, a dangerous state for someone with a badge and a gun. Thorne decided to comply physically while maintaining his legal objection. He didn't want this boy to panic and pull the trigger. "I am standing up," Thorne announced slowly. He rose from the bench, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. He towered over Braden by 2 inches, his broad shoulders filling out the wool coat. Even at 64, Thorne possessed a physical presence that commanded respect. "I am complying with your orders under duress, and clearly stating that this is an unlawful detention." "Turn around," Braden snapped, pulling, his handcuffs from his belt, hands behind your back. "On what charge?" Thorne asked, turning slowly. "Resisting an officer. Obstruction. Failure to identify." Braden was listing charges that only existed because he had initiated the encounter. It was circular logic. "I am arresting you because you wouldn't let me investigate why I wanted to arrest you." "Resisting requires physical opposition," Thorne said to the air, ensuring the dash cam and Sarah's phone picked it up. "I am not resisting. Asserting my rights is not obstruction. Arizona versus Johnson. You might want to look that up before you write your report." "Shut up," Braden growled. He grabbed Thorne's wrists. He didn't use the standard technique Thorne had taught at the academy. Instead, Braden yanked Thorne's arms up high, a pain compliance move designed to humiliate and hurt. Thorne winced, but didn't make a sound. The metal cuffs ratcheted tight. "Too tight! You're hurting him!" Sarah yelled from the sidewalk. "He's not fighting you! Dispatch 4 Alpha 2. Braden keyed his shoulder mic. "1 in custody at Memorial Park. Non-compliant male resisting requesting transport cage." "Non-compliant," Thorne murmured, shaking his head. "Son, you have no idea what non-compliant looks like. You are fabricating a narrative to cover a bad stop. Every second of this is actionable in federal court." Braden spun Thorne around to face him. I said, "Shut your mouth. I'm conducting a search incident to arrest." Braden began to pat Thorne down. It was rough and intrusive. He shoved his hands into the deep pockets of the wool coat. He pulled out the paper sack of birdseed and threw it on the ground, the grains spilling into the grass. He patted the waist, the inseam, looking for the drugs his imagination told him were there. He found nothing. No drugs, no weapon. He reached into the inside breast pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. It was slim black and well-worn. This was the moment. If Braden had opened it, if he had looked at the badge encased in leather or the retired identification card, the blood would have drained from his face right there in the park. But Braden was arrogant. He didn't open the wallet. He simply shoved it into his own cargo pocket. "We'll ID you at the station since you want to be a ghost," Braden said smugly. "If you're hiding your name, you're hiding something else." The walk to the patrol car was a parade of incompetence. Braden held Thorne by the bicep, pushing him forward faster than an older man with stiff knees should be forced to walk. Thorne didn't stumble, though. He marched. He was cataloging every error. Failure to double-lock the cuffs, failure to check the tightness, failure to secure the prisoner's property, the birdseed left on the ground, excessive force during the escort. "You're making a big mistake," Sarah shouted as they passed her. "I have this whole thing recorded. I'm sending it to the news." "Go ahead," Braden yelled back over his shoulder. "Put it on YouTube. Let everyone see what happens when you don't listen to the police." Thorne almost laughed. The irony was suffocating. When they reached the cruiser, Braden opened the back door. The back of a police interceptor is a cramped, hard plastic cage. It smells of stale sweat vomit and industrial cleaner. Thorne knew it well. He had ordered this fleet of vehicles 5 years ago. He knew the legroom was insufficient. "Watch your head," Braden didn't say. He pushed Thorne's head down roughly as he maneuvered him into the seat. Thorne twisted his body to alleviate the pressure on his shoulders. "Seatbelt," Thorne said firmly. Braden looked at him. "What?" "Department Policy Section 402. Procedure for prisoner transport. You are required to buckle the suspect in. If you don't and you get in an accident, the liability falls personally on you, officer." Braden stared at him for a second, hatred in his eyes. He leaned in his face, inches from Thorne's, invading his space again. "You know a lot about policy for a park." "Bum, I know a lot about the law," Thorne corrected. Braden aggressively pulled the seatbelt across Thorne's chest and clicked it. He slammed the door shut harder than necessary. The thud echoed in the enclosed space. Thorne sat back against the hard plastic. His wrists were throbbing, the circulation beginning to slow. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He looked out the window at the park, at the spilled birdseed, at the woman with the phone who was now talking animatedly to someone, probably the local precinct or a lawyer. Braden got into the driver's seat. He didn't look back at his prisoner. He cranked the engine and peeled away from the curb, not checking his blind spot. Thorne noted that too. They were heading to the 12th precinct, Thorne's old house, the building where his portrait still hung in the main lobby, right next to the dedication plaque. Thorne wondered who was working the desk today. If it was a rookie, this might drag on. But if it was one of the old guard, if it was Sergeant Miller or Lieutenant Kowalski. The ride was about to get very interesting. The drive to the station took 15 minutes. For 14 of those minutes, Officer Braden talked. He seemed to feel the need to justify his actions not to Thorne, but to himself, filling the silence with a lecture on civic duty. "See, the problem with people like you," Braden said, catching Thorne's eyes in the rearview mirror, "is that you think you don't have to follow the rules. You think because you're old you get a pass, but out here respect is earned. You respect the badge, you get respect back. You give me attitude, you get the bracelets." Thorne stared back at the reflection, his face a mask of stone. Respect is mutual, officer, and authority is not absolute. It is a trust lent to you by the citizenry. You broke that trust today. "I am keeping the streets safe," Braden scoffed. "You fit the profile. High crime area, baggy clothes, loitering. If you had nothing to hide, you would have just showed me. Your ID. The Fourth Amendment exists to protect the innocent, not the guilty." Thorne replied calmly. "I don't show ID because I live in a free country, not a police state. And baggy clothes is not a profile. It's fashion, or in my case, comfort. You profiled my skin color and my location, nothing else. Save it for the judge." Braden laughed. "You're going to be processed, printed, and you'll sit in holding until you decide to tell us who you are. Maybe a night in the tank will jog your memory." Thorne closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping, he was memorizing. Badge number 49, 22, Cruiser 4, Alpha 2. Time of arrest, 10:14 a.m. He thought about the young officer's career. It was effectively over. Braden just didn't know it yet. There was a tragedy in that, Thorne thought. A waste of training, a waste of a life, all because of an inability to check one's ego. Braden drove fast, weaving slightly through traffic, using his lights to push cars out of the way, even though there was no emergency. Another violation? Thorne sighed. The list was getting so long he would need a notepad. As the precinct came into view, a brick fortress that Thorne had lobbied the city council to renovate back in '98, a strange feeling settled over him. He wasn't angry anymore, he was just tired. Tired that after all his years of work, after all the community policing initiatives, the implicit bias training he mandated, the outreach programs, this was still happening. The cruiser dipped down the ramp into the secure garage. The heavy steel gate rolled down behind them with a final clang. They were sealed in. "End of the line," Braden announced cheerfully. "Let's go get you booked, John Doe." Braden hauled Thorne out of the back seat. Thorne's legs were stiff, and the handcuffs were biting into his wrists, causing his fingers to tingle with numbness. Braden gripped him by the collar of his coat, marching him toward the heavy steel door that led to the processing area. They walked through the sallyport, past the holding cells, where a few men sat on benches, looking up with weary eyes. They entered the main booking room. It was a bustle of activity, phones ringing, officers typing reports the smell of coffee and floor wax. Behind the high booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 58, a hulking man with grey hair and a mustache that had been out of regulation since 1990. He was reading a file, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Got a refusal, Sarge?" Braden announced loudly, pushing Thor toward the counter. "Failure to ID, resisting loitering. Guy thinks he's a lawyer, won't give a name." Miller didn't look up immediately. He finished signing a document. "All right, bring him over. Empty his pockets. You know the drill." Braden already tossed him. "Got his wallet right here." Braden slapped the wallet onto the counter. "He wouldn't open it for me." Miller sighed, looking tired. "Okay, let's see who we have." Miller looked up. The room seemed to freeze. The weak, ambient noise, the typing, the chatter, the radio static didn't stop. But for Miller, the world stood still. He squinted, he blinked, he took off his glasses. He looked at the man in the handcuffs, the man with the grey beard, the heavy coat, and the eyes that Miller had taken orders from for 12 years. "Chief," Miller whispered. The word barely escaped his lips. Braden chuckled. "Chief, no Sarge. This is just some bum from the park." Miller slammed his hand on the desk so hard a stapler jumped. He stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. His face went from pale to a terrifying shade of purple. "Braden, you get those cuffs off him right now." Braden blinked, confused. "Sarge, he's a suspect." He resisted. I said, "Get them off." Miller roared his voice, echoing off the concrete walls. Every officer in the room stopped what they were doing. Silence descended on the booking area. "That is Marcus Thorne. That is the retired chief of police. Are you out of your damn mind?" Braden froze. He looked at Miller. Then he turned slowly to look at the man he had been manhandling for the last 40 minutes. He looked at Thorne's face, really looked at it, and then he looked at the wall behind the desk. There, hanging in a position of honor, was a framed portrait of Chief Marcus Thorne. The man in the picture was wearing a dress uniform stars on his collar, staring out with the same steely calm expression as the man in the handcuffs. Braden's stomach dropped. It felt like the floor had opened up beneath him. I didn't know," Braden stammered. "Unlock them," Thorne said softly. It was the first time he had spoken since entering the building. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Braden's hands were shaking so badly he dropped the key. It clattered on the linoleum. He scrambled to pick it up, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He fumbled with the lock on Thorne's left wrist. Click, then the right. Click. Thorne rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. He looked at the marks, then looked at Braden. "Sergeant Miller," Thorne said, his voice calm. "Yes, Chief. Sir." Miller was already coming around the desk. "I am so sorry, sir. I don't know what." "Secure Officer Braden's weapon and badge," Thorne ordered. "He is relieved of duty pending an investigation into unlawful arrest, excessive force, and civil rights violations." Braden stepped back, his hands up. "Wait, you can't. I followed protocol." "You didn't ID." "Miller," Thorne said. Miller didn't hesitate, Braden gun and shield on the desk. Now, the commotion had drawn attention from upstairs. The door to the administrative offices opened and Captain Reynolds and the current chief of police, David Alvarez, came rushing down the stairs. Alvarez had been a lieutenant under Thorne. Thorne had mentored him, recommended him for the top job. "What is going on down here?" Chief Alvarez demanded. He saw the scene, his officer standing around, frozen Braden looking like he was about to vomit, and Marcus Thorne, his mentor, rubbing bruised wrists in the middle of the booking room. "Marcus!" Alvarez hurried over. "My God, what happened? One of your officers decided the Fourth Amendment was optional today." David Thorne said, his tone conversational, but laced with steel. Chief Alvarez turned to Braden. The look on his face was enough to wither a plant. "Officer Braden, report now." Braden tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Sir, I made a stop at the park. Suspicious person. He refused ID. I arrested him for obstruction." "Did you have reasonable suspicion?" Alvarez asked. "Did you have a crime?" He was wearing a coat in the park. It looked suspicious. He was feeding the ducks." David Thorne interrupted. "I was sitting on a bench. He approached me, escalated immediately, refused to articulate a crime, and arrested me when I asserted my rights." Alvarez picked up the wallet from the counter. He opened it. He pulled out the I-40 retired credentials. He looked at Braden. "You didn't check his wallet, and I was going to do it at booking. You arrested a man for failure to identify and you had his ID in your pocket for 20 minutes. Alvarez shook his head in disbelief. "That is a deprivation of rights under color of law. That is a federal offense, son." Alvarez turned to Miller. "Put Braden in interview room 1. He doesn't talk to anyone until internal affairs gets here. Call the union rep. Tell them we have a gross misconduct situation." "Yes, sir." Miller took Braden by the arm firmly but legally and led the shell-shocked officer away. Braden walked like a zombie, his career flashing before his eyes. Alvarez turned back to Thorne. "Marcus, come upstairs. Let's get you some ice. We can—" "No, David." Thorne held up a hand. "I'm not going upstairs for coffee. I want this documented. I want the body cam footage pulled immediately before it gets corrupted. I want the dash cam. I want the logs. You know we wouldn't hide this, Alvarez," said, looking hurt. "I know you wouldn't," Thorne said gently. "But the system protects its own. And today I wasn't the chief. I was just a black man in a park. If I hadn't been me, if I had been a 19-year-old kid with no knowledge of the law, I'd be in a cell right now with a resisting charge that would ruin my future. We aren't sweeping this under the rug." "We won't," Alvarez promised. "I'll initiate a level 1 investigation personally." "Good." Thorne nodded. "Now I'll take that ice." The investigation was swift and brutal. The video footage from Sarah Jenkins went viral before the police even released their statement. Millions of people watched a young aggressive officer manhandle a calm elderly man. When the news broke that the elderly man was the retired police chief, the national media descended on the city. The body camera footage was even worse for Braden. It showed the sneering, the disrespect, and the complete lack of legal justification. It showed a power trip, pure and simple. Kyle. Braden was terminated 3 weeks later. The review board found he had violated 14 separate department policies and 3 constitutional amendments. He tried to appeal, claiming he feared for his safety, but the video evidence of a man feeding ducks contradicted every word. He was stripped of his certification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. But Thorne didn't stop there. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city, the very city he had served. It wasn't about the money, it was about the president. "If they can do it to the chief," Thorne told the press on the courthouse steps, Imagine what they are doing to everyone else. The city ultimately settled for $450,000. Marcus Thorne didn't keep a dime. He created the Thorne Legal Defense Fund, a non-profit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for indigent defendants who had been victims of unlawful stops. Thorne returned to the park a few months later. It was winter now, and the pond was partly frozen. He sat on the same bench, he wore the same wool coat, he threw a handful of seeds onto the ice. The system is a machine built of laws and people. The laws are often good, the people are often flawed. Marcus Thorne knew that the badge was a heavy weight. It could be a shield for the innocent or a weapon for the bully. It all depended on the heart beating beneath it. He watched the ducks scramble for the food. He took a deep breath of the cold air. He was retired, yes, but as long as there were officers like Braden out there, his watch wasn't really over. What do you think? Was the punishment for Officer Braden enough? Or should he have faced criminal charges for false imprisonment? And have you ever been in a situation where authority was used to bully rather than protect? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power dynamics in our society, please share it. We need to keep these conversations going. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching our coverage. If you gained valuable insights from this case, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Justice Insight Cam. Remain observant, stay safe out there, and catch our next investigation.